Today I am going to be covering my 5 favourite Sapphic facts about Xena. It's been a while since I've done a Xena video, and then I was thinking about, well, one of the facts that I'm about to tell you, and I thought it would be fun to make a quick little video about it. My first favourite fact is that actresses Lucy Lawless and Renee O'Connor, who play Xena and Gabrielle on the show, first found out that there was a lesbian following.
Which was a surprise to me and Renee. I remember it was like the 8th episode in, and we saw something from the Village Voice about the lesbian relationship between these two, and we were like, what, are they crazy?
The fact that they hadn't cottoned onto it just goes to show you how something that's pretty darn gay can still fly under the radar. Well, not for the lesbians. The lesbians cottoned on to the sapphism of Xena pretty quickly. And it's quite possible that co-creator and husband to Lucy Lawless, Rob Tappert, kind of had an idea what he was doing.
And of course, Rob and Liz Friedman, the writers, were like, wow, like they knew what they were doing. It was just me and Renee who were like, really? Yeah.
And that maybe that was the idea behind the whole thing. At any rate, Lucy and Renee did not realize until episode 8. Well, that was the episode called Prometheus, which is where Xena and Hercules join forces to try and liberate Prometheus from some chains that he's been tied down with. The catch is that whoever breaks the chains will die. Both Xena and Hercules are basically fighting each other to have that honor because they don't want the other to perish. There's this moment before Xena and Hercules leave their companions behind to go and do this, where Gabrielle gives Xena this hug, and it's probably one of the first moments of physical affection that we get to see between them. So I don't know, there's something about the idea that the actresses found out that they had a lesbian following and then had this very genuine moment of affection between them. At least to me, it feels like it was a way for the actors to say, hey, we know that this is happening and we're going to lean into it. Which leads into my next favourite Sapphic fact about Xena is that both Lucy and Renee have been super supportive of the subtext, to the point where they even did a Xena convention at one point where one of the writers had given them marriage vows to say to each other, and they stood up on stage and said marriage vows to each other.
I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Xena, until we're very old and very gray. Xena, will you marry me?
Which to me is completely canon. Xena and Gabrielle are now officially married, and there's nothing you can say to convince me otherwise. We've also seen Lucy in particular be very vocal about her support of the queer community.
Lucy Lawless, thank you so much for being such an ally to the community. Thank the community for being an ally to me.
But I think she really understands and she appreciates what Xena was to so many lesbian fans.
There's a lesbian following too.
They're just glad to have a show that they can relate to, you know.
It's also led her to say that she regrets the way that Xena ended. I know this is a sore point for a lot of fans who were watching at the time that, spoiler, Xena dies at the end, and it was seen as like this big heroic choice to make. I think the writers thought it was the right way to end the show, to show Xena's redemption arc come to completion, not understanding, of course, that lesbians had a history of being killed off on screen. I mean, Xena is bi, she's not a lesbian, but as one of the better stories that have been told about queer women, this was a real gut punch for a lot of people, to the point that there are people in my comments who say that they will not watch the final 2 episodes of Xena, even when they rewatch the entire series because of this.
Come on, Gabrielle, let's get wet!
My next favourite fact is that in the episode Fin, Femmes and Gems, the episode where each of them had to become obsessed with something. Xena becomes obsessed with fishing, Joxa becomes obsessed with the story of the ape man, and Gabrielle becomes obsessed with herself.
Cute little gal that's looking really swell. Perfect hair, such a lovely lass. Nice round breasts and a firm
Now originally, and I feel this is a pretty well-known fact, Gabrielle was meant to become obsessed with Xena in the original scripting. This is where the powers that be decided to step in and change that. I guess it was taking what was subtext and making it just a bit too overt. So instead they changed it to Gabrielle falling in love with herself. In terms of the story, it made sense for Gabrielle to fall in love with herself, exploring the idea that she feels inadequate a lot of the time. Now looking back on it, I'm fine with the decision they made because I think part of what made the tension and the subtext so great was that they always just didn't acknowledge it. To have Gabrielle running after Xena and how I assume she would have acted might have been a little bit too on the nose. What am I saying? Of course I would have wanted to see it. Anyway, we didn't get it, so don't have a lot of choice around that one. My fourth favorite fact is that in season 3, episode 2, Been There, Done That, there's this moment.
That a Hickey?
And there's this reaction that plays out. It's very clear that the person who gave that Hickey was Gabrielle. And then at the end of the episode, there's this moment where Xena is holding these 2 turnips and she kind of puts her arms around Gabrielle and jiggles them around like she's holding some boobies. I'm assuming that a lot of people know this fact too if they know anything about Xena, that these are 2 ad-libs by Lucy Lawless. This was not, in fact, in the script.
That line, is that a Hickey? That was an add-in from Lucy Lawless added that line in.
She grabbed them, put them where they are, and we ran with it.
And this is what I mean about Lucy and Renee leaning into the subtext.
We did sort of take the piss and, the New Zealand term of having a great time with the subtext,
It made it pretty explicit, if you ask me. And in fact, this is one of the moments that corroborated my theory about when Xena and Gabrielle got together. I made a video on that, link in the title cards. And my final favorite Sapphic fact about Xena Warrior Princess is that 2 of the episodes were actually written by a fanfic author and fan of Xena Warrior Princess, Melissa Good. What? You say? Now, Melissa Good is prolific. She has an entire website, which I'll link in the description below, where she's written multiple epic Xena and Gabrielle stories. In terms of Xena fanfic authors, she is hands down the most well-known. Back in the day, she'd already created quite a name for herself amongst the Xena fans, and the creators of Xena came to know about her writing, had clearly read enough of it to understand that she had an incredibly good grasp of the characters, and then they approached her to write a couple of episodes. Now, I remember reading an article about how all of this went down and what happened. I'll pop it in the description below for you guys to have a read too. She wrote season 6, episode 1, which was Coming Home, a story about Xena and Gabrielle coming back to the Amazon homelands to find it destroyed. And with Ares at the time having lost his powers, he's trying to wrangle his army again to fight against the Amazons. Xena and Gabrielle therefore hatch a plan to foil him. And he's also going insane because the Furies are after him. There's nothing too subtexty between Xena and Gabrielle in this episode. Apparently half the episode got rewritten because of Eve's storyline and where the writer's room wanted to take it. But there was some tension between Eve and Varya, and that got a few people's attention. The other episode that she wrote was Legacies. In this episode, Xena and Gabrielle have decided to go on a holiday and they end up in a desert, caught up between the Romans and the indigenous people of the desert. The moments that stand out in this episode for me is when Gabrielle, who is set to be executed for the death of one of the desert people, Xena ends up saving her and they sit down to have a chat at the end of the episode.
You saved me today, Xena, against the greater good.
Gabrielle, in everyone's life, there's something that goes beyond the greater good. That's what you are in my life.
And this is a through line that has gone on throughout the series, tying up the sort of question that had been raised in earlier seasons, what someone should sacrifice in order to work for the greater good. And I thought that was such a beautiful moment. And even before knowing that this was written by Melissa Good, I remember loving this episode for that scene and for what it said about Xena and Gabrielle and about how important they are to each other. That's it for my favorite Xena facts. I'm sure there are plenty more that you'll let me know about in the comments. Check out the links in the title cards as well as the links on your screen. And until next time, lady lovers.